Happy Tuesday. Hopefully the lighting is not too horrible. I'm calling in from a hotel this week as I'm in San Francisco meeting some of you in person. But very excited to be here. Also, how cool. We have people dialing in from so many different places across not just the country, but the world. Got people from Israel, Chicago, Pakistan, Jersey. Heck yeah, Jersey represent. Really excited to have you all on the call today. Pretty exciting topic. I think a pretty common topic. I can't tell you how many times I hear people talking about management trainings, whether it's on a people forum or on LinkedIn. There are always these questions. How do I get my managers to attend? How do I know what training topics to cover? So hopefully we'll be able to answer some of those questions today. But before I jump in, let me introduce myself. Let me introduce Athena, and then we will go ahead and get started. So for anyone who doesn't know, my name is Melanie Naranjo. I head up the people team at Athena. We are a compliance platform. We do all things from compliance training like harassment prevention, data privacy, HIPAA, all the way to anonymous reporting, LMS essentials. And so we're really excited to be here with all of you today. And for anyone who has been on one of my calls before, you will know that I like to keep it very interactive. So I'm very pleased to see how many people are already leveraging the chat. I will be using pulse questions. We will be calling on some of you. Don't worry, we never turn your cameras on. If you don't want me to call on you, the disclaimer is just put a little asterisk next to your response because I don't want you to not participate because you're scared of being called on. And if I see an asterisk, then I will make sure not to call on you so you can still participate via comments. Thank you all. And a spoiler alert, some of these tips and what you'll be seeing in action are actually some of the tips that I'll be sharing on the call today. So with that said, really excited to go ahead and kick it off, and please all keep using the comments. I love it. It keeps me really excited. It makes me feel like I'm not just sitting here alone in my hotel room. So with that said, let's go ahead and kick it off with some interactivity. First question for everyone. On a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you agree with this statement? 5 being I super agree, 1 being not at all. Effective management is critical to a company's overall success. Curious to see the answers here. Got some 5s. I'm waiting to see if anybody gives like a 1, a 2, a 3. No, it's just 5s across the board, and it's just coming right in. Thank you, everyone. Oh, got a 5 plus. Amanda, if you could give Stacy Verdino access to unmute herself. Stacy, I love the enthusiasm. Give me a little bit more here. Why for you is this a 5 plus to effective management being critical to the company's overall success?
Can you hear me, Melanie?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So I've run homegrown people manager courses at most of the organizations I've been a part of, and I've found that from an HR perspective, people managers are the first line of defense, and giving them a toolbox is so important for them to be that person for their teams. And I think when you've got that first line of defense and they have the right tools, then it sets everybody else up for success.
Yeah, I love that. I love that wording, that first line of defense. Tell me a little bit more there. How do you define that? What do you mean when you say they're the first line of defense for employees at the company?
I think if employees felt that trust that their people manager really had their best intentions at heart, they'd have that relationship with them instead of running to HR all the time.
Oh, okay.
And that's, and it's not because I want to make my job easier. It's because I want people managers to do what they're supposed to do.
100%. I mean, here's the thing, right? We need to be smart about the fact that HR teams are small. We can't do everything, but also we don't want to be damage control, right? Because there's only so much that we can do after the fact once it's too late and all the damage has already been done. I really like that. And I don't know if you're seeing this, but in the comments, we've definitely got some support for what you're saying. So thank you very much. Let
Thank
me,
you.
and yes, please, everyone keep commenting on this. I'm going to call on one more person just because I always like to get a diversity of perspective on this. Alexandra Bishop, if you could unmute yourself, you gave a 10 with 3 exclamation points. You know, why is this such an obvious yes for you?
I think I was thinking about both in my personal experiences and also just what I hear from a lot of other people, the phrase of people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. And I feel like management has so much to do with retention, employee engagement, employee job satisfaction. I just think if someone really loves their job but has an ineffective manager in any sort of way, it can again impact retention. It can impact their satisfaction with the company, satisfaction with the job. I just think it's one of the most crucial parts of an employee's experience.
100%. I don't know if anyone, I was obsessed with that McKinsey study that came out about a year ago now, where they showed the top, I think it was like 5 reasons that people leave companies. And everyone thought, you know, compensation was going to be number 1, right? But actually, number 1 was lack of growth opportunities, shortly followed by management. And so you can really see that all these things are really tied in, and, you know, money is just one piece, right? And I think sometimes we over index on that, and we don't look at what you're talking about, which is look how much influence and power the manager has over the employee's life cycle at the company. And I think Katja in the comments made a really great point about psychological safety, which I think ties into this, right? You need to be able to have that strong relationship with your manager, which brings us to today's topic, which is, you know, management training and why it's so critical. It is just an easy, obvious investment that should be made. Thank you so much for sharing, both of you. Super helpful. So, you know, I'm glad that we have some buy-in here. I'm glad that you all can see in the comments that you're all backing each other up. You're seeing the same story. The question is, how do we get this story to the rest of the company? How do we get people bought in? How do we get people to take the trainings? I'm assuming that many of you are on this call because this is something that perhaps you are struggling with. Let me call on someone who seemed to be, you know, interested or okay with being called on. Let me give the mic to, let's try Pamela Lee. If you could unmute yourself, Pamela Lee, and then I promise we'll go into some tips, so on and so forth. But, you know, given that this is so important to you, it's a 5. Let me ask, being on this call, what do you think are some of the challenges to getting managers to then take management training at a company?
Yeah, I think there's a varied level of experience that at least like the current company that I'm at, which is a small startup, 100 people, there's varied experience across the board. So I think it's, for me at least, it's trying to find like the right balance of information that's going to be relevant for newer managers, but then also have a depth to it that is engaging for our more senior managers. And because it's small, it's a small company, you know, also trying to scale that out and streamline, you know, our trainings and build engagement with each other so that it's not just information coming from the people team, but it's also them like finding community within themselves and also like helping each other and engaging with each other, because really like that's where a lot of like rich conversations come from, is like hearing from each other like what's worked and what's been challenging.
100%. And I heard a couple of things in what you're saying. And also I'm seeing Sarah made a comment in the comments. Anyone else who wants to jump in on this, please do. Oh, thank you, Karen. You know, I'm hearing a couple of trends and threads here. And by the way, we also saw this in the questions that came in the registration, right? You know, complaints of, you know, not having enough time, you know, trying to get people engaged. How do we get, you know, how do we make sure that it's relevant to them, right? These are challenges that come up constantly. And so, you know, part of the goal of today is really going to be to try and address those head on. So thank you so much. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about the first challenge that tends to come up, the time challenge. Let me ask yes, no in the comments. Can you all tell me, yes, no, do your managers often complain that they don't have enough time for management training? Okay, there's quite a bit of excitement on this one. I can almost feel like a sense of catharsis, a relief getting this out. I feel all of you. Yeah, lots of excitement here. Let's try Nipur. If you could unmute yourself, Nipur Bhatt, you said yes all the time. Tell me a little bit more about this. What do you mean when you say that your managers are always saying they don't have time? Give me more context around this. I'll give it another second in case there are technical difficulties. And if not, we'll call on someone else. Okay, let's try Stephanie Claudia Miller. If you could unmute yourself, I like that you said yeah with all these A's. Why is this a yes for you?
Oh my gosh, first of all, did not realize that somehow my full name is showing up. So you could call me Steph.
Okay, great. Steph, tell me more. What do you mean when you say that your managers say they don't have time for management training?
Yeah, I think what is difficult for us, we're a startup, we're small. We are also a distributed company where we have folks who some of them are working in person, some of them are working remotely. And the folks who are working in person, their experience is going to be very different than the folks who are working in a more remote environment. And trying to get those managers to understand that they are really the keepers of culture on their locations to make sure that their employees feel supported, to make sure that they feel heard. I can make an announcement like as a floating head all day, but the messaging coming from them and them really embracing the importance of it just makes a huge difference.
100%. And when they tell you, hey, I don't have time for this, what reasons do they give?
It's often that there's not enough time in the day, that something, came up, there was an emergency that needed, a fire that needed to be put out. But trying, the dot that I want them to really connect is that sometimes those fires happen because they haven't done the management training up front.
Oh, I love that point. It's super meta. We're going to cover that later on because, what if the issue is you need training on time management? That's why you can't find time for this. I love that. Thank you so much. Let's hear from one more person. Okay, I love the person who spelled LOL. I won't call on you, Maureen, because I see the asterisks, but that's hilarious. Let's try Chris Miller. Chris Miller, if you could go ahead and unmute yourself, tell me a little bit more about, what goes through your mind when managers say they don't have enough time? Is this a common excuse or a reason why?
Yeah, this is going to be my experience is that anyone in management that or in any kind of leadership role for that matter, time is an issue, and I want to respect their time and value their time, and that's so important. But I think the previous person who stated that a lot of times it's because of the lack of skill, maybe, or lack of experience, or lack of whatever can lead to that, the challenge of a time crunch. And sometimes it's just adding that skill or ability that training will offer can really help alleviate those issues.
These are all so great. Thank you so much for sharing. Let me jump into the next slide because I hope that this is going to be quite helpful and relevant to what you all are talking about. The reality is, to everyone's point here, your managers aren't lying. They have a lot on their schedule. They have a lot on their plate. Even if they really want to take management training, they might genuinely not have the time. There are so many hours, there are only so many hours in the day. And, for anyone who has been trained up on management training or, the power of saying no, right, wisely, saying yes to one thing means saying no to something else, right? They already have a full schedule. So if you go ahead and add another hour or two for management training, where are they going to find that hour? Do they drop something else that they're doing? Do they work later into the day? And so my first recommendation, anytime you want to roll out a management training, is if the argument is that this is necessary, this is required, this is good for the company, then that means that we as a company have to meet them halfway and help them find time for that training. And so my first recommendation is always replace, don't add. So if you have, for example, monthly or weekly or whatever town halls, cancel one and replace it with a management training. That is that same hour that they can now use for that management training, and everyone else has that time back. I am sure they will be very grateful. Have them partner with their own manager to find time. Ask them to work with their managers to say, hey, which team meeting should I drop this week so that I can attend management training? Or, hey, which thing can I deprioritize to next week so that I can make time for this training? Make sure that you are actually meeting your managers halfway. If they feel like they're talking to a wall and you're not listening to their needs, why would they take us seriously and listen to us and listen to our needs? So I do think it's really important that we listen to our managers when they say they don't have enough time. It's true, they don't. And so what are we as a company going to do to help them find that time? The other way that you can replace and as opposed to adding is making it a working session. So what I mean by that is train them on a thing that they have to do anyway. And this is the time when they can do it. So an example, at Athena, we actually have performance reviews coming up. And so our next management training is actually going to be a performance review writing workshop. We're all going to come together and we're going to peer review it. We're going to workshop it. We're going to do the work that they already have to do. If you don't have performance reviews coming up, that doesn't mean you still can't do this. You could do, for example, what's a difficult conversation that you've been putting off? I'm going to help you on this call and we're going to do it together. How do we give feedback? Okay, think really proactively. Here's a piece of feedback that I need to give. Or maybe it's a time management lesson. Hey, on this call, we're going to do the work that you would have to do to manage your time better. We're going to audit our calendars. We're going to work together to determine which recurring calendars can be cut down, can be made less frequent. So make sure that you're actually using this time rather than giving them homework assignments, right? I hear this a lot from people. Hey, I try to give them work to do afterwards, but then nobody does it. Or I give them a pre-read and nobody does it. Yeah, because they don't have the time. So build that time into the session itself. And then finally, I really like incorporating live coaching. And what I mean by that is you could have office hours, but who has the time to sign up for office hours, right? You might not have time to create office hours, and they might not have time to then sign up for those office hours. Or it might be just decision-making fatigue. Oh, now I have to look at my calendar, find what time makes sense. Instead, just do coaching on the call. They can ask you live sessions similar to what we're doing with these pulse check questions. I call on you, we have a conversation, we talk about what works, what doesn't, or we go into breakout groups and you distribute the workload by having the peers coach each other, right? So again, when we're thinking about time, I really want us to be thoughtful about this. I think oftentimes we can sort of like butt heads. I don't have enough time. Well, you better make the time. That doesn't solve the problem. If someone's telling you they don't have enough time, okay, let's think about how we build that in for them, how we accommodate that need. So hopefully these tips will help. And I'm loving the comments and I'm very glad to see that this is landing. Okay, let's talk about the next challenge that often comes up. And this one we're going to go into a little bit more detail because it can be quite complicated. So the buy-in challenge. Let's do a pulse check question. Scale of 1 to 5, how much do you all agree with the following statement? My managers are all bought into the idea that they need management training. 5 means they all think, yes, I need management training. 1 means, nah, can't get anyone to agree that they need it. For the record, I can see that there's a variety of responses and I really love it. I'm going to call on the 2 extremes because I think it's really helpful to hear from both sides. So let's call on Heather. This is a really interesting one. Heather V. DeCamp. Let me know if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. If you could go ahead and unmute yourself, tell me more about your answer. You gave a 5, but then you also said they ask for it when they don't, but they don't attend. Tell me a little bit more.
Yeah. Hi, Melanie. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I was like, how do I answer this? Because like last year we were doing management training. It had been asked for, so we rolled it out. We asked for topics. We were doing all these things that we thought were right, but we couldn't get people to attend. So then we stopped, we paused, we did a survey. What changes can we make to make this a better use for you? And they asked for all the things we were already doing. They just weren't attending the meetings. So it's just like, I have no idea. Like 5, they ask for it. 1, they don't attend. So that's why I'm here hoping I can get some ideas.
Oh, that is very interesting. And it looks like you have an agreement with Melanie Kelly. Melanie Kelly, if you could unmute yourself, tell me a little bit more, because it seems like maybe you have some insight or additional things to share here with regard to people wanting trainings or asking for them, but then not attending.
Yeah, I see this with management training and training in general. I think people want it to be offered. They want to know that it's available if they can attend, but they don't see it as mandatory. And I think when we think about management training, they see that sometimes as an escalation of doing the work that they were doing when they were an individual contributor, but they don't necessarily see it or make the time for the actual management themselves. And that's the piece that gets lost, is this management training feels optional, something that they might want to attend if they had the time to do so, but they're not held accountable to the management and the success of their team from a management perspective, not just the metrics and getting the work done piece.
Gotcha. Okay, I will flag at the end. I have some tips that I think will help with these. Because of timing, I'm not going to go into them right now, but I do want to flag, it looks like several people in the group this is resonating with several people. So we'll definitely make sure we get to this. And thank you all for sharing. Let's call out someone on the other extreme. So who maybe doesn't have managers who are quite bought into the need for training. Let's do Alex Monaco. If you could unmute yourself, tell me a little bit about why this is a 2 for you. Why don't your managers think that they need management training?
So just for some context, I work for a global tech company. We're no longer in startup mode, but a lot of our people managers are recent individual contributors that have transitioned into people management roles. And there's just a real lack of understanding about what the responsibilities of a people manager entail. So we have a lot of people that really focus more on the technical aspects of their roles and really spend minimal time on the people management piece. So I just think that there's a lack of understanding of the importance of it. And so it's tough to get buy-in and interest until something goes very wrong, and then HR comes in, and it's a good learning opportunity, but we want to, of course, be a bit more proactive than reactive. So yeah, that's kind of the struggle I'm facing. It's just you're really communicating the importance of the people management piece.
Gotcha. Okay, we are absolutely going to cover that in just a second. I'm going to call on one more person, and then we'll go ahead and I'll reveal my tips. Christopher Peterson, you gave a 1.5 on this one. Why aren't your managers bought into the idea that they need training?
I think a lot of it is people kind of where I've run into frequently is people saying that, they've already kind of done some of this stuff, or they're relying on leadership. So I'm in a company that has people that have been in leadership roles for a while. And so they've kind of come to the idea that they don't really think that they need to do it because they've had the title for so long. They think of managing as a position as opposed to an action. And so trying to get people back into the mindset that like, it's like running a marathon or staying in shape. Like if you're not doing it, you're not there.
You are getting a very strong agreement in the comments. Thank you, all of you, all 4 of you, for sharing. I think there's, we're hearing a trend, right? Either managers want it, but they don't make the time for it, or it's optional, or they don't think they need it because it doesn't feel relevant to them. And I think the trend that I'm seeing is in all of this, right? Oh, it feels like a nice to have, not a must. It feels like maybe I could do this if I really wanted to go above and beyond, but it's not really required of me. Maybe there's not that buy-in of like, who cares? Like, what's the big deal if I don't do this thing? I'm doing the job, right? Like, I don't need to do all these extras. If that's the case, which I see a lot, there are 3 approaches that I recommend strongly when trying to get buy-in, and none of them, for the record, are fear tactics, which I think we often see. And it makes sense, right? I think often it'll be like, you must do this. If you don't do this, it's a performance issue. And it is true. It is a performance issue. And also that tends not to be very strong incentive, especially if you have a leadership team that isn't reinforcing these behaviors and actually holding people accountable. And so the question becomes, how do you win people over rather than trying to force something onto them? And the first recommendation or the first approach that I recommend is the empathy approach. And I think this one might catch people by surprise because it's not quite what it sounds like. It's not sort of like empathy for the manager in the sense of, oh gosh, I know you have so many things on your plate. Why make time for this? It's actually putting managers into the position of their own teams. And what I mean by that is reminding them that, oh, hey, you're an IC too, in a way, right? Like you also have a manager. And I wonder if these things apply to you. And what I mean by that, or the way that I would play that out is rather than saying something that might put someone on the defensive or that, might just not get people bought in. So for example, you need to do this thing, or, we're hearing from employees that you're not giving effective feedback, right? Instead, making it about them and not making it about, what they need to do or what the direct reports are saying, but hey, let's talk about you for a second. What's the worst feedback you ever received from a manager? What made it so bad? How did that feel? How did that impact you? And what you'll find is that managers will start to have these really cathartic experiences, right? Like, oh my gosh, this person gave me this horrible review. It was so vague. I didn't know what to do on it. It made me feel like I was terrible at my job. I got so frustrated, right? And then what you can do after you've given them that opportunity to really, vent, process, feel vulnerable is to say, hey, I bet you wouldn't want your own teams to feel that too, right? I bet you'd never want to be the person who did that to your direct report, right? So let's talk about how we make sure that you are a better manager than that manager, right? And for the record, you always want to make this, a safe space and never accusing anyone. So I always recommend giving them the out of like, it could be any manager, not your current manager, just in your experience, right? But once you start to do that, you'll see that managers will open up, right? They'll be like, oh yeah, I don't want to do that. I want to be better for my direct report. So the first recommendation I have is when you introduce these topics, make it about them rather than making it about their direct reports, and then slowly win them over in that way. Okay, it will help bring down their defenses. It'll make it clear to them, look how relevant this was. It still affects you to this day. You're still mad at that manager, right? And it will also help them build trust and community with each other as a community of managers, which is always top of mind. It can feel really lonely being by yourself as a manager sometimes. The second approach that I would recommend to get buy-in is really think about how you're creating an environment where people will feel comfortable to feel vulnerable. If you host a training on a difficult topic and the manager's manager is on that call or the manager's direct report is on that call, they're not going to want to open up, right? Because maybe the challenge that they're facing has to do with their direct report, who is also a manager and is on that call, right? And so a couple of things that I always recommend is really think about, to the extent possible, switching up who you're putting together. So putting managers who are from different departments together if you're a larger company. If you're a smaller company, divvying up by frontline managers versus senior level managers or skip level managers. That way people aren't interacting with their own managers or direct reports. And I would say a low lift way of doing this for anyone who's like, Melanie, I hear you and I'd like that, but I don't have the time to do that, is just have maybe 3 cohorts, 3 trainings. There's a spreadsheet and everyone just signs up, and it's up to them to decide which of these sessions you want to attend. That way you don't have to be the one doing the work. They're doing it for themselves and they can pick which one they are or aren't comfortable attending. Okay. Let's now talk about the third approach that I recommend, which is the partnership approach. Now, some of you have talked about the idea that, maybe the reason they can't find time for this training is because they need training on how to be more efficient with their time. And I think that's exactly right. I think that when someone is not attending a training, even though to some of your points, right, they're asking for this training, clearly they want it, but they're not attending. I think it is really important to dive deep and try and understand, okay, what's the underlying issue here? Is it that we don't have a leadership team that is reinforcing this as a real need? Is it that someone wants to attend the training, but they now feel that, oh, if I attend this training, my manager is going to think that I'm slacking because I didn't do this other thing that they wanted me to do instead? Is it, I genuinely don't know how to make the time for this? Is it, this isn't a topic that's relevant to me, right? And so in order to make this more effective, I recommend that you partner with your managers and help them be part of that decision process, which it sounds like some of you have already done, which is great. Straight up ask them, why aren't you able to make time for these, and what topics would you want to see? Because you may be surprised by some of the information that they bring up. I say this in particular because oftentimes companies will default to the same typical management trainings, and there's nothing wrong with, topics like how to give effective feedback, how to set vision, how to set clear goals, right? Those are all important topics. And also they might not be immediately relevant to your company's needs, right? And so the topics that often get overlooked are things like time management, or how to transition from being someone's peer to now being their direct manager, or how do I make sure that I'm not micromanaging, but at the same time, not paying attention to their performance at all? How do I make sure that I'm not becoming an armchair therapist for someone? I'm trying to be a supportive manager, but at the same time, we spent an hour talking about how upset they are about this one thing and we didn't get anything done, right? And so it's really important that you think about what are their needs today, not just what are these high level management topics that maybe aren't going to be of interest to them on that given day. Okay, any questions on any of this? You all can drop anything in the comments at any point. And also we have a question bot, or a question box. So if you want to drop those, we can try and address those at the end. If not, I'll go ahead and move on to the third challenge that often comes up, which is the engagement challenge. How do you keep people engaged on the call? I'm going to ask a pulse question. Scale of 1 to 5, if you all could tell me 1 to 5, how much do you agree with the following statement? My managers are completely engaged during trainings. No Slack messaging happening on the call. 5 is yes. 1 is, oh boy, cannot get anyone to pay attention. I feel like I'm talking into the ether. What was even the point of doing this training? All right, I'm seeing some LOL faces. I'm seeing some zeros, some ones. Let's call on someone on the extreme. Let's do Casey Ashenhurst. You gave a 0, not even on the scale. You are below the scale. Why is this a 0 for you?
Just for some of the reasons that folks have already mentioned, right? Like they really just have lots of stuff to do, and no matter, you can do all the planning that you can, but if there's, something going on that's really impacting the business, right? It's like, it's hard to, make that case that people need to like turn off all of their stuff and all of it, so I think it just is really hard to get people to take the time.
And what's the impact when that happens? So you're on a call, you're doing a training, and you notice that 3 people are clickety clacking while you're chatting. What's going through your mind as that's happening?
Me personally,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I find it distracting for myself, and then depending on what the training is, I think I'm more or less concerned about it, right? Like if it's a piece of information that is really critical versus I mean, obviously you want everything to be pretty critical, but then later if it's like something where then I'm repeating myself or something like that, that can be, frustrating.
Yeah, I want to have a moment of empathy for you and every other HR person on this call right now, right? It's distracting for you, right? How do I keep my engagement, my energy, and my focus when I can tell that other people aren't paying attention, right? I am also worried, what if they are not paying attention to what I am telling them and they're going to miss something really important? Do I pause? Do I repeat myself? Do I ask them if they need a minute? Is that rude? Will that come across as passive aggressive? All these thoughts can go through your head and it can be really stressful. So I want to thank you for sharing. Let's call on one more person. Alfredo Fierro, if you could unmute yourself. You gave a 1 here. What do you notice in terms of distractions on the call? And what do you notice as the impact, whether on you or other people who are on that call taking that training?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Melanie. Yeah, like basically this type of distractions, as you mentioned, and also the previous participant is basically understanding if the program and the investment that we are doing is actually getting a return. It's actually an investment, right? Regarding the topics that we are including, the initiatives that we are putting here. But my main concern here is that they're not getting the content in the proper way and put this into routines and next steps, you know? So that's my main concern. Like, how can we push this? And as this phrase is called, walk the talk, right? Something that is not only going to stay in the classroom, but it's also going to go into routines and into the processes that we're trying to change and improve as well.
Yeah, I love that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the last section, right? Like, how do I know then that they're going to implement the things that we're actually training them on? And also, I think you alluded to this, and I'm seeing it in the comments as well, which is this idea that, oh, it's setting a bad example for other people, right? Oh, this person's not paying attention, so why should I pay attention? Or, oh, okay, so I guess it's fine to not be fully focused on this, when, of course, you know, any other meeting, if they were doing this, actually wouldn't be appropriate. And there's this ripple effect that it has, right? It's a culture setting effect, but also it's a retention effect. And so I want to talk about some of the reasons behind this and how to try and mitigate that. So a couple of things that I think are really, really important that tend to get overlooked, which is it's really important that we as facilitators really think about the different learning styles, both from an effectiveness perspective, but also from an inclusivity perspective. The reality is most people don't learn by sitting through a 1-hour lecture. And I'll give an example. On this call, right, you know, I can even feel, I imagine you all can as well, when I'm asking you questions, when I'm calling on people, when we're interacting in the comments section, there's sort of like perky effect, right? Like I'm perking up, I'm paying attention. Oh, okay, I might be called on. Oh, I have something that I want to contribute, right? Versus when we're just sitting there and I'm talking for 5 minutes straight, sort of like, yeah, okay, Melanie, can we get to the next point? I could have read this on my own, right? And so it's really important that we think about, okay, how do people actually retain data? How do they learn? How do they stay engaged? Couple of things that I like to throw out there is really thinking about the different learning types. I taught English in China for a year, and it's funny that I still use some of these learnings today. I remember learning about different learning styles. So kinesthetic, which is like I learned by doing; auditory, I learned by listening; visual, I need to see something on the screen. If I didn't have the stack, I wouldn't be able to follow along because I'm not processing the words that this person is saying, right? Or I actually need to read and write beforehand, so send me a pre-read, right? Thinking about the different needs across your teams and what's going to engage different people, because it's not one size fits all, which means you're going to have to incorporate a lot of different mediums and exercises to keep it engaging for everyone. Also thinking about the fact that somebody told me this the other day, which was fascinating to me. Apparently, as adults, we learn best by storytelling. So if I tell you, like, here's a great tip, remember it, that's actually a lot harder to remember than me telling you a story. Like, hey, when I was in China, I taught English and I had to learn different learning styles, right? And now I remember that story that Melanie told me, right? And so just thinking about, how can I convey information in an engaging way that people will actually retain? The other thing is to think about different personality types. So you might have introverts or extroverts. So that's one of the reasons why I like to interact on the comments and why I like to give people the option to give the asterisks is, you know, some people might not want to speak up. Some people maybe wouldn't contribute if they were scared they were going to be called on. Some people are really comfortable. I actually think that the whole remote world has really been a great equalizer for people, because if we had been in a live session, people might not have spoken up to share their voice or their opinion, but they're much more comfortable doing it in a comment, right? I don't have to speak. I'm just sharing my opinion. I have time to think. And you know, some people are more comfortable being vulnerable, less comfortable being vulnerable. So you really want to think about how you ask questions and through what forms they have to respond. And then finally, thinking about identities, thinking about power dynamics. Is this a first-time manager? Is this a really junior employee? Is this person coming from a really different corporate environment? And so they're nervous to share. They don't have psychological safety built up yet, right? Maybe they have different life experiences. Maybe, for example, you know, I'm a person of color in a predominantly white company, and I'm nervous to speak up, right? So really thinking about all the different dynamics that could be at play in any training that you're hosting. And so with that in mind, let's talk about some solutions that can help with this. you really want to get rid of that lecture style and really start embracing a more creative work and dynamic workshop that caters to a variety of personality types and learning styles. And I really mean that. This isn't just like a cheeky rebrand, like replace lectures with creative workshops. No, really do it. And here are some ways to do that that are tactical and actionable. A scripted role play. This sounds so cringe. And I remember when I first did it at Athena, I was like, oh, it's so awkward because I hate them. And actually, it ended up working really well because what we did was my boss and I, we read a script that we had prepared beforehand, and then we just asked people to comment on it. And what was great was that people could really observe the information, not have to be vulnerable about a thing that they had experienced, and they could just comment on some hypothetical scenario, right? And it puts them in the moment, like, oh, yes, I really identify with that. Another way to do something similar is sample scenario. If you really hate scripted role plays, you could put a sample scenario on the screen, have people read it quietly, and when they're ready, drop their thoughts. Another thing that I really, really like to employ, as you can tell because I do it in all my webinars, pulse check questions. It's really hard to ask someone to answer an open-ended question like, why did you attend this call today? What's the thing that you want to get out of this? What's the hardest thing about being a manager? Those are really hard. They take a lot of time to answer, and it requires a lot of vulnerability. Instead, you could ask a yes/no question or a 1 to 5 question. And then what you can do is call on that person and have them elaborate and really allow for that conversation to move in an organic way. And giving that person that pulse check to start with makes it so much easier to open up from there. Other things are breakout groups. I won't go into too much detail about this because I'm sure you're all well familiar with that. Leveraging comments. And if you're in person, I actually recommend that you get whiteboards so people can write their thoughts down. Again, some people learn and contribute best by writing things down rather than having to speak up over people. And finally, I'll say, this is one that I really, really like and I don't think gets leveraged often enough, is exercises that really lean into bringing out your inner child. And what I mean by that is fun activities that sort of pull you out of the work mindset for a second. One example that I like is, Life Labs is this really good one where they're sort of like, okay, everyone, I want you to draw 2 bunnies and just, no context, just draw some bunnies, have a great time. And they put people in pairs and they say, give each other feedback on this drawing that you just did, leveraging, the feedback best practices that we've given. And what it does is it brings a sense of levity to the experience while also having people just have fun for a moment while you're actually actioning and practicing these best practices. So I really, really encourage you to the extent possible to really think about how you are incorporating each and every one of these into your trainings, really, really diversifying it so that every 5 minutes you're doing something a little different to keep different learning styles engaged, okay? Seeing some comments, so this is great, loving this. And then finally, let's talk about the adoption challenge. Some of you mentioned this, we do a training, but how do we get people to actually do the things or implement the learnings? So last pulse check question, I think, scale of 1 to 5, how much do you agree with the following statement? My managers quickly and consistently apply the lessons learned in management trainings. 5 being they do it right away, it's great. 1 being not really, we did the training, but nothing changed. Okay. And you know what? I want to call on someone in the middle this time because I've been doing the extremes. Let's do, let's see, Julia Burkham. You gave a 3 here. Why is this a 3 for you?
Yeah, I think in the past when I've done, manager trainings, there are definitely some who do not, but I find that there's at least a large enough portion of managers who I've witnessed like in conversations or in our like coaching one-on-ones reference parts of the training and ask me questions about it afterwards. So, I give it a 3 because there's definitely room for improvement, but it's not so bad that I get a sense that they're not paying attention at all. So I think the questions that I get afterwards and seeing it being applied in some of our leadership team meetings warrants a 3 for me.
Got it. And do you have a sense of, is there a pattern that you've picked up on, like these things tend to be more easily implemented and these don't, or these teams tend to be the ones that implement them and these don't, or first-time managers really are adopting it, but senior level managers are just not?
Yeah, it depends because definitely first-time managers are more thirsty, I think, for the knowledge. And then, some of your mid-experience or mid-level managers are like, I've done this before, like they're all kind of the same. And so there's not, there tends to be not as much takeaways. And then then you have like managers of managers that are just in a completely different ballpark. So it's not a one size fits all. And I think that that's kind of um, where I think there could be improvement because, to earlier points, people don't have time. And it's like, even, some of us HR professionals that wear many different hats, and we don't have a special like L&D person to build out specific programs. They can just be a little more cookie cutter and then not as applicable to more experienced managers or managers of managers. So definitely long answer short, earlier managers, I think tend to absorb a little bit more.
Super helpful. And I'm going to guess you're not alone. In fact, I'd love if anybody in the comment section could just say, like, me too, if you have also witnessed that sort of, there are disparities across the teams, or maybe it's, junior level managers or first time managers are the hungriest for it. Okay. Yeah. It looks like you've got some agreement here. Okay. So let's talk about what we do about it. How do we get people to actually, first of all, why don't they apply things? And second of all, how do we get them to apply it? I think personally that the challenge here that we face is that most trainings offer far too much detail and complexity. And what I mean by that is we focus really hard on in the weeds rubrics, like here's exactly how to give the best feedback ever. And here is like a 9-point performance matrix on how you define if someone's performing or not, and when you have to say something and how you performance manage them, so on and so forth. And we do that, I think, because, maybe we have lost trust because it hasn't been working. So we're trying to take back a lot of control, or maybe, we're in damage control phase. So we're trying to correct things right away and really quickly. And actually, I think that when we do that, it's to our own detriment. I think what we really want to be doing is replacing complexity with simplicity. And I'll give an example of what the two look like. So I think a really common topic is performance management. And where I think that most people tend to lean towards is, hey, let's have a 5-page, 9-point performance matrix on how we define for every job, for every level, how performance looks for you and how it should be, and when you should say something and what a performance improvement plan looks like, and all these things. That's a lot to take in. It's not easy to memorize. It's not easy to action on. And quite frankly, it's overwhelming. The manager looks at this and their eyes glaze over. Never mind, I'm not going to do it. This is too much. I don't want to say anything. It's going to turn into a whole thing. It's going to make my life a whole lot harder. I'm better off just leaving my mouth shut and not saying anything, right? So that person is not going to apply the very thoughtful tips that you put into place. Instead, what you could do is focus on a simplistic approach that targets outputs, not inputs. What I mean by that is at Athena, we actually noticed that this was providing people a lot of difficulty, complexity, confusion. And so what we said is, you know what? We're going to make this very simple for you all. All you have to do once a quarter is ask yourself these 3 questions of each of your direct reports. If the answers are good, you don't even need to talk to me. If the answers are bad, let's have a conversation and see what we need to do next. And those questions, just to try and get to hopefully show how these work, is 1, is my direct report making my job easier or harder, right? If my direct report quit today, would I feel panicked or relieved? If I could go back in time, would I hire this person again? And what's great about these questions is there's just 3. It's easy to remember. It's easy to action. You can ask yourself these questions, and it removes all the nuance, right? It removes the emotion of like, oh, well, they do this well, but sometimes they don't do this, but maybe it's a me problem. Maybe I'm the one who's not doing the thing I should be doing. No. Get rid of all of that and just get to the heart of it. Are they making your job easier or harder? Would you hire them again? How would you feel if they quit? Right? And from there, we can now have that more nuanced discussion. And so I really encourage you, for all of the trainings that you are doing, think about, what is the end goal? What are you trying to achieve? For us, in this case, what we wanted to do is, if there was a performance issue, we wanted managers to be able to identify it and be able to flag it so that we could help them. That's what we wanted. That's all we wanted, right? And so that's what we focused on. We didn't focus on making sure that everyone was a perfect expert on being able to do this all by themselves. We just wanted to make sure that they could identify the issue and flag it. So hopefully this is a helpful example of what that looks like in practice. So a few bonus tips for everyone as we approach the end of the call today. Just want to keep this in mind for everyone. You want to think about your long-term sustainability. You cannot realistically, especially as a small HR team, create a comprehensive training from scratch every single time. So you really want to think about, how often am I going to do this? How can I maximize my time? Maybe you record the trainings and then you upload them to an LMS, and then you just auto assign them to new managers. Maybe you have a core like 3-part training, and then you have a once a month refresher where it's low lift. So for example, maybe it's just a management training series, or maybe it's just a Q&A series where you have a VP at the company answer a series of questions. What's the hardest part about being a manager? What tip do you give for managers? Whatever the case may be. You could also do a book club style series, very low lift for you. I wouldn't recommend having people read a book each time. That's quite a heavy lift, but you could have everyone watch a 5-minute TED Talk. And then you come to the call and you just talk about it. Hey, 1 to 5, how useful was this for you? Do you agree? Do you think that we as a company are doing this effectively? Why or why not? What resources could we lend to help you do this better, right? And leveraging external resources. There are a ton of free resources out there that you can leverage, and we'll talk about those in the next slide. In terms of accountability, we were talking about this earlier, and I said I'd circle back to this. I think it's really important that you be loud about the management trainings that are out there, because your ICs can help hold your managers accountable. Because if you say, hey, we're hosting this training for managers, ICs are then going to expect that their managers are going to have some learnings from this, right? And they can say, hey, I know you had a feedback training. I'd love to learn more about what you got from it, right? Another one is don't try to get everything perfect in one go, especially if you're thinking about a whole series. I know a couple of people asked in the questions, how do I pick the full series and do it perfectly and make sure I've got the right topics? Start with one topic and then roll it out and then get feedback and adjust along the way. You're going to learn a lot of insightful information from that, rather than doing everything at the beginning and then realizing, once you roll out the first one that, maybe you went in the wrong direction. People aren't engaged. People aren't attending. Don't forget to go meta. What I mean by that is, as you're doing the trainings, pay attention to the things that your managers are saying, the questions that they are struggling to answer, when they are more engaged, when they are less engaged, because that's all really valuable data for you. You might find on the call that, there's not enough leadership support, or, oh my gosh, we've never actually defined what our performance culture is at the company, right? So make sure that you're also leveraging this for your own data and insight. And then finally, I would say, at the last few minutes on the call, because again, we don't want to add time, we want to replace time, right? On the call, collect data at the last 3 minutes, and we're actually leverage this here. The last 3 minutes, just put the survey out there and say, hey, before everyone signs off, we've got 3 minutes left, click on this link, complete the survey, right? And then finally, I just wanted to share some resources that you all might want to leverage. We have a free manager training that we offer through Athena that covers some of the topics that we've discussed. Again, this is low lift for you. You could just assign it to your managers. Our management training gives you access to our platform, so you can assign, send reminders, check on completion status. This is an easy way for you to do this. And you could even, if you wanted, leverage this as a segue into a live training. So, hey, you're going to watch this 10-minute module, and then in a month, we're all going to meet and we're going to talk about what you learned, what you liked, what you didn't, what do you think we're doing well as a company on this topic, so on and so forth. I also want to highlight, Athena has a low-cost LMS, which is, the idea is you can host all your content. So we were talking about recordings, right? If you don't have an LMS, you can record your own trainings, host it on our platform, and then assign those so that you don't have to keep doing it from scratch every single time or do it live, because let's be real, many times you won't have the time or bandwidth to do that. And then finally, wanted to give it a heads up that we are rolling out a more comprehensive management training. It's Management Essentials. For anyone who's interested, you can request a demo here, or for our smaller companies, smaller businesses, anyone with under 50 employees, you can actually skip the demo process and just go through self-serve. Also, anyone who's curious can also use this link to check out our pricing if you're curious about what the cost is. Again, we don't want to have blockers for you all, so you can just skip the demo process and go straight to see what it costs for you and see if it's something that you could afford, if it's with your budget, is something you want to consider getting budget for down the line. And then lastly, I wanted to put an ask for you all. Amanda, if you could put these surveys out now, or the polls out now, if you all could give me 30 seconds of your time. We are rolling out 2 new products, anonymous reporting and data privacy training. And we're just curious to get people's thoughts. You all are in the PayPal space. We're not asking, do you want to buy this? We're asking, hey, as we build out these platforms, are these products, would these be of interest to someone in your world with your kind of company? So one is for anonymous reporting. So this is employees reporting incidents at the company. And then data privacy, the question is around phishing. I'll read them out in case anyone wants me to. Mute me if you need to read quietly without hearing my voiceover. The question that we'd love to get feedback from you all on is, we hear a lot from companies that sometimes people don't take their compliance training. It's actually really critical concern. And so we need to force employees to take it by deactivating some of their accounts and saying you can't get access back until, you complete your HIPAA training, for example. Would you be interested in a tool, a compliance tool that could do that for you? So anyone who was in breach of completion status on a certain date, it just automatically deactivated it for you. And then once they completed their training, it turned it back on for you so that you don't have to track who is or isn't in compliance. And then the second one is, would you be interested in a tool that would do phishing tests for you? So sending out a phishing email to see which employee, are your employees able to identify that this is a phishing email as part of your cybersecurity. All right, well, thank you all. I really appreciate it. We are at the end of time. If anyone wants to drop any questions, let me know. In the meantime, keep in mind that we host webinars once a month. So if you're interested, you can sign up to stay in the loop on any of our sessions. And if you have any recommendations on topics you would like to cover, send them our way because we're always looking for new ideas. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate you being such an interactive group. Hope this was helpful and sending you all the best on this lovely Tuesday afternoon. All right, thanks everyone. Bye.